Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK, and today's game has Kovacs playing Muldrotha, the Gravetide. This is a graveyard shenanigans deck, hoping to combo out to kill his opponents. Busterkins brought the BeamTown Bullies to the table. He wants to put scary, horrible things in his graveyard, give them to his opponents, and ruin their day. Hunter's playing Captain Nghathrod, who's on the Horror Tribal plan with a mill strategy backup. And then there's me, playing Edgar Markov, and I lean a little bit more towards making tall vampires as opposed to going wide. And with that, let's jump right into the game. Kovacs won the die roll, not you, Busterkins, for a change. He plays Evolving Wilds and goes and finds an island and says go. He plays Sulphurous Springs as his land for turn and then passes it over to Hunter. He draws and plays a tapped Path of Ancestry, enabling future scries. Onto my turn, I play Terramorphic Expanse and then immediately sacrifice it to go find a mountain. And then I pass the turn over to Kovacs for turn 2. He plays Command Tower as his land, and he'll pass over to Busterkins, who plays a forest, and he also says go. Bunch of land dropping, not much else going on, huh boys? Temple of Deceit is played by Hunter, getting him a scry to the bottom. Then over to me, I play a swamp as my land, and then I cast Rakdos Signet, increasing my mana production. Over to Kovacs, he draws and plays a swamp. Then he'll make it harder for us to attack him by casting Propaganda. So now we'll have to pay a tax for every creature we attack him with.
How am I supposed to attack you now?
Yeah. Kovacs just smiles and passes over to Busterkins, who plays Blightstep Pathway as his land. Then he'll ping himself one with Sulphurous Springs to cast Phyrexian Arena, enabling future card draw on his upkeep. Hunter drops an island as his land for turn, then he casts Chasm Skulker. This will get bigger every time he draws a card, and when it dies, make him a whole bunch of blue squid tokens. On my turn, I play Pillarverge Pathway as my land for turn. Then I cast Stromkirk Captain. This will trigger Edgar Markov, getting me a 1/1 vampire. And then I pass the turn. Kovacs plays Drowned Catacomb as his land, and then he casts Vol, Candlekeep Researcher. Vol tapping for 3 mana seems pretty good for casting things out of his graveyard. On to Busterkins' turn, he'll draw 2 and take 1 life. Then he'll drop Birds of Paradise. And he follows that up by casting Arcane Signet as well. He passes over to Hunter, who draws, triggering Chasm Skulker, getting a +1/+1 counter on it, getting a swamp on the battlefield, and then he'll cast Grazilax, Illithid Scholar, and hoping to get some more card draw. He'll scry 1 to the bottom thanks to Path of Ancestry. Then he moves into combat, swinging at Busterkins. On damage, it'll trigger Grazilax, drawing him a card, and then triggering Chasm Skulker, getting another +1/+1 counter. With that, he passes the turn over to me. I play Silent Clearing as my land. And then I move to combat at Hunter with my 2 first striking creatures, dropping him to 36. Then I cast Vampire Socialite. She's like, yo, have some 1/1 counters, you guys. And I pass over to Kovacs. He plays Shipwreck Marsh as his land, and then he casts World Shaper, which can mill whenever it attacks, and when he dies, all of his lands from his graveyard can come back out onto the battlefield tapped. With that, he moves to combat with his Vigilance creature over to Busterkins, dropping him to 34. On Busterkins' turn, he draws off of Phyrexian Arena, as well as for turn. Then he plays Master of Cruelties. This thing could potentially drop an opponent's life total all the way down to 1. Over to Hunter, he draws for turn, triggering Chasm Skulker. Then he plays Night's Whisper. So he draws 2, loses 2, and gets 2 more counters on Chasm Skulker. He plays Creeping Tar Pit as his land for turn, and then he plays Dream Devourer. And that guy will allow Hunter to foretell cards from his hand if he wanted to. He passes the turn over to me. I move right into combat at Busterkins with my Menacey Vampire Socialite. Then I cast Captivating Vampire, who will enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it thanks to Vampire Socialite. I pass the turn over to Kovacs, who plays Blighted Woodland as his land, and then he plays Merciless Executioner, which will force everybody to sacrifice one of their creatures. So World Shaper, Birds of Paradise, Dream Devourer, and Vampire Socialite all hit the bin. World Shaper says, yo Kovacs, get this Evolving Wilds back out into your battlefield tapped. And then he passes it over to Busterkins, who plays Demonic Tutor, allowing him to go fetch up something from his library.
That's what I should have done. I should have attacked, then played him, sacrificed him, and got my land back.
Sounds like Kovacs thought of a better line that he could have had with his World Shaper. But hey buddy, it's okay. Despotic Scepter hits Busterkins' board, and that could be used to destroy anything that he owns, which could be used to good effect if he starts giving gifts to his opponents. On to Hunter's turn, he plays Drawn from Dreams, so he'll look at the top 7 of his library and then put 2 of them into his hand. Now this won't trigger Chasm Skulker because he's putting them into his hand as opposed to drawing them. He plays Barren Moor as his land for turn, which enters tapped. On his end step, I activate my Captivating Vampire, and I steal Chasm Skulker. So thanks to Hunter's hard work of giving all those +1/+1 counters on it, I get a nice beefy Chasm Skulker on my board. I draw, and then I play Sign in Blood. So I'll draw 2 more cards and lose 2 life, again triggering Chasm Skulker. I play Inspiring Vantage as my land for turn. Then I move into combat with Chasm Skulker right back at Hunter, which probably feels awful. Sorry, bud. I drop him down to 22, and I pass the turn, leaving up my 5 vampires to steal some more stuff. On to Kovac's turn, he cracks his Evolving Wilds, getting a forest. Then he plays his commander, Muldrotha the Gravetide, allowing him to start reanimating and recurring things from his graveyard. In this case, he'll replay that Evolving Wilds, sacking it again for a swamp, and then he passes the turn over to Busterkins. He draws his 2 and takes 1 life, and he casts his commander, the BeamTown Bullies, a hasty threat that can give gifts to his opponents and do diabolical things. He attacks Hunter, and then has to move to discard at the end of his turn. Eater of Days and It That Betrays hit his bin.
You gotta die.
Why, bro?
On to Hunter's turn, he plays a Mind Flayer, allowing him to gain control of a creature for as long as he controls the Mind Flayer.
I'm going to target Captivating Vampire.
And with that ETB trigger on the stack, I activate my Captivating Vampire, and I take his Mind Flayer in response. Not ideal, but it allowed me to keep my stuff. I play Rakish Air. This will trigger Edgar Markov, getting me another 1/1. I clean up my board state a little bit, and then I announce that I'll move into combat. And in response to that, Busterkins gives me an Eater of Days thanks to the BeamTown Bullies. I consider my options for a moment, and I decide to Teferi's Protection in response to being targeted by the BeamTown Bullies. So I have protection from everything, all of my stuff phases out, and then it goes over to Kovac's turn. He'll use Vol to add 3 mana plus a forest to cast World Shaper from his graveyard thanks to Muldrotha. Then he plays Stitcher's Supplier, milling the top 3 cards of his library and putting them into the graveyard, which ends up being a couple of lands and Sir Conrad the Grim. Then he casts Kaya's Ghost Form on Muldrotha, which will return Muldrotha to the battlefield should it die or get exiled. Over to Busterkin's turn, he casts Thrill of Possibility, so he'll discard a card and then draw 2 cards. He'll play Balaged Sanctuary as his land for turn, and then he casts Entomb, going and finding a card and putting it into his graveyard. In this case, he'll find Plague Reaver, aiming at giving it to one of his opponents and making them sacrifice their stuff.
Oh, I thought we had a thing, Brandon. Oh, and so you tried to Eater of Days me.
Yeah, you're gonna need the knife for betrayal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, remember all the flack that Kyle got for betraying?
Literally, he still gets it all the time.
Well, Kyle literally killed some. Who did he kill? Did he kill you?
Yeah. Man, he got so much hate mail though. Oh my god, it was so funny.
It was pretty bad.
And you thought, and he thought the video was going to do bad because of it, and it did really good because of it.
So Busterkins and I spoke a little bit about being friends this game, but with the Eater of Days, I don't think so. I play Vanquisher's Banner, then follow that up with Stromkirk Noble. This will trigger Edgar Markov as well as Vanquisher's Banner, drawing me a card, and I'll grab a counter for Chasm Skulker. I play Myriad Landscape as my land for turn. I activate Captivating Vampire, targeting the BeamTown Bullies, but Busterkins says, yo, I got this deflecting swat. So he redirects my target to my Captivating Vampire, which does nothing for me. I move to combat and swing at Busterkins. He declares blocks, but before damage, he activates the BeamTown Bullies, giving me a Plague Reaver. The good news is that I still am able to deal him 15 points of damage, and I have 2 cards that I could discard to satisfy Plague Reaver. So I'm able to sacrifice Plague Reaver and then target Kovac's with it. So it'll go to Busterkin's graveyard, and on Kovac's upkeep, he'll get the Plague Reaver instead. On my end step, he grabs a forest and a swamp off his Blighted Woodland, and then he gets that Plague Reaver on his battlefield. He plays Blooming Marsh as his land for turn, followed by Behold the Beyond. So he discards his hand, searches for 3 cards from his library, which I'm sure are the combo pieces that he needs to close out this game. He'll cast Dark Ritual, giving him 3 more mana, using 2 of it for Altar of Dementia, and then he follows that up by casting Lotus Petal, which will sacrifice itself for 1 mana. After that, he moves into combat and has enough points of damage at Busterkins to knock him out of the game. Then he'll demonstrate a combo loop.
Activating Altar Dimension, I will sacrifice Muldrotha,
Okay.
targeting Hunter. He'll go into the bin. Kaya's Ghost Form will go to the bin, right? Then because he died, he comes back out. I sack this, tap sack it, get a black, targeting Kaya. Bring it back, attach it to him. And now I cast Lotus Petal from my graveyard with Muldrotha, sack him again, and then so it'd be another 6 at you, and then so on and so forth.
Our decks. I'm going to have you draw 4 cards.
Awesome.
Alright, and then,
Cool.
and then I'll die.
Well, congratulations, Kovacs. Job well done on your cool Graveyard Shenanigans Muldrotha deck. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Consider supporting us on Patreon, and as always, thank you for watching.